Don't turn on the lights unless you want to meet the person waiting for you. The whisper came out of nowhere, soft but urgent, and Ethan Walker felt a hand wrap around his wrist before he could reach for the switch beside the front door. For a man who had built a $4 billion company and stared down hostile takeovers without blinking, the sudden touch should have made him pull away. Instead, something in the young woman's voice made him stop. The hallway of his Connecticut estate was dark except for the pale silver glow of the moon slipping through the tall windows. Outside, the wind moved through the oak trees, and the branches scratched against the glass like quiet fingers. Ethan had come home 6 hours early from a business trip after a meeting in Chicago had been canceled. His private driver had dropped him off, the security gate had opened, and everything had looked perfectly normal. Too normal. The woman standing beside him slowly let go of his arm. Ethan could barely make out her face, but he recognized her. Naomi Brooks, 26 years old, a black waitress from the Harbor House downtown. She had served him coffee and grilled salmon more times than he could count, and she had always seemed calm, polite, and almost invisible to the people around her. Seeing her inside his house at nearly 10 o'clock at night made no sense at all. Ethan lowered his voice. "Naomi, what are you doing here?" She shook her head before he could say another word. "Please, just listen. Someone is inside the house." Ethan almost laughed. His estate had cameras, alarms, private security, and a system that cost more than most families earned in a lifetime. Nobody simply walked inside. But then he noticed something strange. The grandfather clock in the living room had stopped ticking. The fountain outside had gone silent. Even the air felt different, heavy in a way he could not explain. Naomi stepped closer and pointed toward the kitchen. "I saw a light upstairs from the garden. I thought it was you, but your car wasn't here. Then I heard voices." Ethan frowned. "Why were you in my garden?" Her eyes dropped for a second. "I came to leave something for you. I didn't want anyone to know." Before Ethan could ask another question, a soft sound drifted through the house. It was small, barely there. The sound of a door closing somewhere above them. Both of them froze. Ethan looked toward the staircase. His heart started beating faster, not because he believed Naomi completely, but because he knew every member of his staff was off tonight. The house was supposed to be empty. Naomi reached into her pocket and held out a small silver key card. "I found this by the side entrance an hour ago," she whispered. "I think whoever dropped it didn't realize it was gone." Ethan took the card and stared at the logo pressed into the metal. His smile disappeared. The card belonged to someone who worked for him, someone he trusted. Naomi looked at him, her voice barely louder than the wind outside. "I didn't know who else to call, and I was afraid if I left, you'd walk in alone." Ethan looked up at the dark staircase stretching toward the second floor of the house he thought he knew. And for the first time in years, the billionaire who had planned every minute of his life realized someone else had been waiting for him to come home. Naomi gently closed Ethan's fingers around the silver key card and looked toward the staircase again as another faint sound floated through the house, this time the slow creak of a floorboard that should not have moved. Ethan had spent years learning to trust numbers, contracts, and security reports, but none of them explained why the card in his hand belonged to Daniel Cross, the chief of operations who had worked beside him for almost a decade. Daniel had access to every office in the company, every executive meeting, and every emergency plan, but he should not have had any reason to be inside this house tonight. Ethan pulled out his phone and frowned. No signal. That was impossible. The estate had its own private network designed to stay active during storms and power outages. Naomi reached into the pocket of her jacket and slowly held out her own phone. "Mine stopped working an hour ago," she whispered. "I thought it was just me." Ethan looked through the front window toward the driveway. The security lights that normally covered the property in a warm glow were dark. His cameras were offline. His gate was silent. The expensive technology that protected his home suddenly felt useless. Naomi took one careful step toward the kitchen hallway. "I know this sounds crazy, but I think somebody wanted you to walk in and believe everything was normal." Ethan wanted to argue, but the words would not come. He looked around the house he had built for peace after years of endless business travel. Family pictures lined the walls. Awards sat on polished shelves. A jacket he had forgotten last week still hung by the door. Everything looked exactly the same, yet something about the silence felt wrong. Naomi stopped beside the kitchen entrance and pointed toward the back of the house. "That is where I came in. I saw the garden gate open. I thought one of your workers forgot to lock it." Then I saw someone moving past the windows upstairs. I called out because I thought maybe you had come home early, but nobody answered. Ethan stared at her. You could have left. Naomi nodded. I almost did. Then I saw your car pull into the driveway. Ethan let out a slow breath. Why did you come here to leave something for me? Naomi hesitated. Her hands tightened around the strap of her purse. Last week you came into the Harbor House for dinner. You left a folder behind. I tried to return it through your office, but nobody called me back. I finally decided to bring it here after my shift. Ethan remembered the folder immediately. It held plans for a scholarship program his company had quietly started for local students. Naomi smiled a little. I did not open it. My grandmother taught me that what belongs to somebody else stays closed. Before Ethan could answer, a soft light suddenly appeared under the door of his home office across the hall. Both of them froze. The office had been dark only seconds before. Ethan felt the cold air against his face as Naomi slowly reached for his sleeve. Her voice was barely a whisper. Mr. Walker, I do not think we are alone, and I do not think whoever is here knows you came home early. The thin line of light under Ethan's office door stayed perfectly still, and somehow that made it worse because it meant whoever was inside was not rushing or hiding. They were comfortable. Naomi looked at Ethan and saw the confidence that usually filled magazine covers disappear for the first time. She gently pulled him back into the shadow of the hallway. Do you have another way out? She whispered. Ethan nodded toward the library. There is a service hall behind the bookshelves. It leads to the old wine room and the security office. Naomi let out a quiet breath. Then we need to get there. Ethan looked at her, still trying to understand why a waitress from a neighborhood restaurant was calmly giving directions inside his own house. You still have not told me why you stayed, he whispered. Naomi kept her eyes on the office door. Because somebody once stayed for me. Ethan frowned, but there was no time to ask. Another sound drifted through the house. It was not a voice. It was music. Soft piano music floating from a speaker somewhere upstairs. Ethan stopped walking. That song. Naomi looked at him. You know it. Ethan nodded slowly. My mother used to play that every Sunday morning. Nobody else would know that. A chill ran through the hallway. Ethan suddenly realized this was not random. Whoever had entered his home knew his habits. They knew his schedule. They knew what would make him stop and listen. Naomi reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. I was going to leave this with the folder, she said. Ethan looked at the handwriting across the front. It simply read, Mr. Walker. You wrote me a letter. Naomi gave a nervous smile. Not exactly. My grandmother did before she passed away. She worked for your family many years ago. Ethan looked surprised. My family. Naomi nodded. She cleaned offices downtown. She always said your father treated people with respect. She told me if I ever had the chance to meet you, I should remember that success means nothing if kindness gets left behind. Ethan stared at the envelope in silence. I never knew her name. Sarah Brooks, Naomi answered softly. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but a sudden click echoed through the house. The office light went out. The hallway became dark again. Naomi quickly grabbed Ethan's arm. We have to move. They slipped through the library, careful not to make a sound. Moonlight spilled across rows of books and old family photographs. Ethan noticed one picture on the fireplace had been turned upside down. His heart sank. Somebody had walked through this room. Somebody had touched the memories of his family. Naomi stopped beside a large wooden shelf. Is this the hidden door? Ethan reached for a small bronze statue and turned it. The bookshelf slowly opened with a quiet rumble. Cold air drifted out from the narrow passage beyond. Ethan motioned for Naomi to go first, but she shook her head. You lead. This is your home. Ethan looked into the dark passage and then back at the silent library behind them. For the first time that night, he realized Naomi was risking just as much as he was, and before either of them could step inside, a voice from somewhere deep in the house calmly called out his name. Ethan Walker, I know you are home. The voice echoed through the house with calm confidence, not loud, not angry, just certain, and somehow that made Ethan's heart race even faster because only a handful of people knew the hidden passage behind the library. Naomi looked at him and saw the question in his eyes. Do they know about this place? She whispered. Ethan slowly nodded. My father built it years ago. He only showed it to family and a few people he trusted. Naomi did not say a word. She did not have to. Ethan already understood what she was thinking. Trust had brought somebody into his life who should never have been there. The hidden door stood open beside them, the cool air drifting from the narrow hallway beyond, But before they could step inside, the same voice spoke again. Ethan, you can stop hiding. We only need to talk. Ethan froze. He knew that voice. Daniel Cross, the chief of operations. The man whose key card Naomi had found. The man who had worked beside him through product launches, charity events, and difficult board meetings. Daniel had celebrated holidays with Ethan's family. He had attended birthdays. He had been called a friend. Naomi looked at Ethan and quietly asked, "Is he the one?" Ethan swallowed hard. "I do not know anymore." A soft light suddenly appeared at the far end of the library. Somebody was carrying a flashlight, but the beam stayed pointed toward the floor as if the person did not want to frighten anyone. Daniel's voice came again. "Ethan, the security system failed tonight. I came to check on the house when I could not reach you. Then I found signs that somebody else had been here." Naomi gently touched Ethan's sleeve. "Something is wrong," she whispered. Ethan looked at her. "Why?" She pointed toward the hidden passage. "If he came to protect you, why is he standing between you and the front door instead of checking the rest of the house?" Ethan looked back toward the library and realized she was right. Daniel was blocking the easiest way out. Naomi took a careful step into the hidden hallway. "Mr. Walker, you told me your security cameras are connected to a private system." Ethan nodded. "They record everything." Naomi frowned. "Then why would somebody come here if they knew they would be recorded?" Ethan felt a cold chill. Unless they believed the cameras would never be seen. Before he could finish the thought, Daniel called out again. "Ethan, I found your office open. Your safe has been touched. I think somebody is trying to steal from you." Naomi looked up at Ethan. "Did you open your safe today?" "No." "Did anybody know you were coming home early?" Ethan thought about the canceled meeting in Chicago. Only a few executives. Daniel was one of them. The silence between them grew heavy. Naomi slowly reached into her purse and pulled out the folded envelope from her grandmother. She looked down at it and then back at Ethan. "My grandmother used to say that honest people ask if you are safe. Dishonest people ask what you have lost." Ethan thought about Daniel's words. He had not asked if Ethan was all right. He had not asked if anybody was hurt. He had only mentioned the office and the safe. Another soft sound drifted through the house. A phone began to ring somewhere nearby. Ethan reached into his pocket. It was his phone. The screen had somehow found a signal for just a second. One message appeared before everything went dark again. The sender had no name attached to it. The message contained only 6 words. "Do not trust the man calling you Ethan." The message disappeared from Ethan's phone as quickly as it had arrived, leaving nothing but a black screen reflecting his own confused face. Naomi looked at him. "Who sent it?" Ethan slowly shook his head. There was no name, just the warning. The silence inside the hidden passage grew heavier. Behind the bookshelf, Daniel's voice moved through the library again, calm and patient. "Ethan, if you can hear me, answer. We need to leave this house." Naomi studied Ethan's expression. "Do you trust him?" Ethan leaned against the cool stone wall and closed his eyes for a second. "I trusted him with my company. I trusted him with my family. I trusted him with every secret that mattered." Naomi nodded. "That is not what I asked." Ethan opened his eyes. "I do not know anymore." The hidden hallway stretched ahead of them, lit only by a few small emergency lights that had somehow stayed on. Ethan led the way toward the old security room his father had built years ago. Dust covered the shelves, and old family photographs hung on the walls. One picture made Ethan stop. It showed his father standing outside the house with a group of employees during a holiday party. Naomi leaned closer. A smile crossed her face. "That is my grandmother." Ethan looked carefully. Sarah Brooks stood in the back row, smiling beside his father. She could not have been more than 30 years old. Ethan looked at Naomi with surprise. "She really worked for my family." Naomi nodded. "She stayed for almost 20 years. She always said your father knew the names of every worker in the building." Ethan looked at the photograph for another moment before sliding it gently back into place. "My father used to tell me that loyalty is earned every day." I thought I understood what he meant. Naomi gave him a quiet smile. "Maybe tonight you are learning it." They finally reached the old security office. Ethan switched on a backup monitor powered by a separate battery. The screen flickered before showing grainy black and white images from a few cameras that were still working. The front gate was empty. The driveway was empty. The kitchen was empty. Then camera 7 came to life. It showed the library. Daniel Cross stood there alone with a flashlight in one hand and his phone in the other. He looked tired, worried, and completely calm. Naomi pointed at the screen. Wait. Ethan leaned closer. Daniel was talking to somebody on the phone. The old security system had no sound, but Ethan could read his lips. He watched Daniel say 4 words very slowly. I found him already. Ethan stepped back. Naomi looked at him. He was not talking to you. Ethan shook his head. No. Before either of them could say another word, another camera switched on by itself. It showed the back garden where Naomi had first entered the property. A dark sedan rolled quietly through the open gate and stopped near the kitchen entrance. One person stepped out carrying a small briefcase. Ethan stared at the screen. Naomi looked at him. Do you know him? Ethan felt his stomach sink. The man walking toward the house was not a stranger. It was Michael Walker, his younger brother, the one person in the family who knew every hidden room, every old passage, and every secret their father had ever built into the house. Michael Walker stepped out of the sedan and closed the door behind him without looking around, as if he had walked that path 100 times before. The security monitor filled the small room with a cold blue glow while Ethan stared at the image of his younger brother crossing the garden. Naomi looked from the screen to Ethan. You did not expect him. Ethan slowly shook his head. Michael lives 3 hours away. He never comes here without calling first. Naomi watched the screen carefully. Then why is he carrying a briefcase in the middle of the night? Ethan did not answer because he was asking himself the same question. Michael reached the back entrance and stopped. A second later, Daniel appeared and opened the door from inside the house. The two men shook hands. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. Daniel and Michael knew each other, of course. Family dinners, company events, holidays. But seeing them together in the dark house, while everyone believed Ethan was out of town, changed everything. Naomi pointed toward the monitor. Wait, Daniel is giving him something. Michael slipped a folded document into the briefcase before both men disappeared inside. Ethan stepped back from the screen. My brother owns shares in my company, he said quietly. Not enough to control it, but enough to sit on the board. Naomi folded her arms. Would he gain anything if something happened to you? Ethan looked at the old family photographs hanging on the wall. Years ago, after their father passed away, the company had gone to Ethan because he was the older son. Michael had accepted the decision, or at least Ethan had always believed he had. My father trusted me to lead, Ethan whispered. Naomi looked at him with kind eyes. Trust seems to be a difficult word tonight. Ethan let out a quiet laugh that carried no joy. You were right about that. Suddenly, the old security monitor flickered again. Another camera came online. This one showed Ethan's home office. Daniel and Michael walked inside and placed the briefcase on the desk. Michael looked around the room before pointing toward the large painting above the fireplace. Ethan's eyes widened. Behind that painting was a second safe that almost nobody knew existed. Naomi looked at him. What is inside? Ethan hesitated. Family papers. Company records. My father's personal journal. Naomi noticed something else on the screen. Michael was shaking his head. Daniel looked frustrated. They were searching for something, but they could not find it. Ethan suddenly reached into the pocket of his jacket and froze. Naomi looked at him. What is wrong? Ethan slowly pulled out a small leather notebook. The edges were worn from age. My father gave this to me 10 years ago, he whispered. He told me never to leave it in the house unless I trusted everyone around me. Naomi looked at the monitor and then back at the notebook. Do they know you have it? Ethan thought about the canceled business meeting, the strange message on his phone, and the music that had played through the empty house. Then he understood. They were never waiting for me to come home, he said softly. They were waiting for this. Before Naomi could answer, a small radio on the old security desk suddenly crackled to life. Static filled the room. Then an elderly voice spoke through the noise. If Ethan Walker can hear me, do not let them open the notebook. Your father trusted the wrong people once. Do not make the same mistake twice. The old radio fell silent, but the words stayed in the room like a storm cloud. Ethan looked down at the leather notebook in his hands and realized it felt heavier than it had only a few minutes before. Naomi gently closed the cover and looked at him. Your father knew something, she said. Ethan nodded slowly. My father trusted people until they gave him a reason not to. Naomi smiled a little. My grandmother was the opposite. She trusted people after they earned it. Ethan almost laughed. Maybe they would have liked each other. A sudden beep from the security monitor broke the silence. Camera 7 came back online. Daniel and Michael were leaving the office. Michael looked frustrated while Daniel checked his watch. Then Daniel pulled out his phone and made a call. This time the old security system captured a few broken pieces of sound. He has it. We need to find him before sunrise. Ethan stared at the screen. They know about the notebook. Naomi looked toward the hidden hallway. Then we have to know why. Ethan opened the leather cover carefully. Inside were pages filled with his father's handwriting. Business notes. Family memories. Quotes from old books. At first nothing seemed unusual. Naomi turned a few pages and stopped. Someone had placed a small photograph between the sheets. She picked it up carefully. It showed Ethan's father standing beside Sarah Brooks outside the company headquarters almost 30 years earlier. Both of them were smiling. On the back of the picture were 5 handwritten words. Trust Sarah if anything happens. Naomi looked at the photograph and felt her eyes fill with tears. My grandmother never told me this existed. Ethan looked at the words for a long moment. My father left you a message before either of us knew each other. Naomi turned another page and found a folded letter hidden inside the notebook. The paper had turned yellow with age. Ethan carefully opened it. The letter was short. If you are reading this, then somebody has forgotten that a company is built by people, not by money. Sarah knows the truth. Her family must protect this letter until the right day comes. Ethan looked at Naomi in disbelief. Your grandmother was protecting something for my father all these years. Naomi nodded slowly. She never spoke much about her old job. She only told me that one day I might have to do something difficult for a good person. Ethan looked around the small security room. You came here tonight because you wanted to return a folder. Naomi smiled through her tears. Maybe. Or maybe my grandmother knew I would need to be here. The old radio suddenly crackled again. This time the same elderly voice sounded weaker. The library. Hurry. They found the second passage. Ethan jumped to his feet. Naomi carefully folded the letter and placed it back inside the notebook. We cannot let them have this, she whispered. Ethan nodded. He looked at the old photograph of Sarah Brooks and his father one last time before slipping it into his jacket pocket. As they hurried toward the hidden hallway, the security monitor changed one final time. The screen showed Daniel and Michael standing in the library. Neither of them was speaking. Both were staring directly at the bookshelf that hid the secret passage. And then Michael slowly smiled and reached for the exact bronze statue that opened the hidden door. The bronze statue slowly turned on the security monitor, and the hidden bookshelf in the library began to move. Ethan grabbed the notebook and looked down the narrow passage ahead of them. There was only one way forward now. Naomi quietly took the old radio from the desk and slipped it into her purse. If that voice speaks again, we might need it, she whispered. Ethan nodded. And together they hurried through the hidden hallway that his father had built decades before. The walls were lined with old bricks, and small lights flickered above them. Every few feet, Ethan noticed dates carved into the stone. 1987, 1993, 2001. Naomi ran her fingers across one of the carvings. Your father came down here often. Ethan looked around. I thought these were just maintenance records. Naomi shook her head. Look closer. Ethan leaned toward the wall. The numbers were not maintenance dates. They were years that important employees had retired from the company. Some names were written beside them. Gardeners, secretaries, drivers, janitors, receptionists. Sarah Brooks was there too. Ethan smiled softly. My father remembered everyone. Naomi looked at him. Maybe that was the real secret they wanted to protect. The radio suddenly crackled again. Turn left. Hurry. The same elderly voice sounded stronger now. Ethan followed the direction and opened a heavy wooden door. Inside was a small room unlike anything he had ever seen. Shelves covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Hundreds of old boxes sat neatly arranged with handwritten labels. Family, employees, scholarships, community. Naomi slowly walked through the room. This is not a vault for money. Ethan shook his head. It is a history of the company. On a large oak table in the center of the room sat another envelope with Ethan's name written across the front in his father's handwriting. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single page. If you are standing in this room, then you finally understand that our greatest investment was never buildings or machines. It was people. Protect this room because the truth inside belongs to every family that helped build our dream. Naomi looked around at the shelves. Ethan reached for one of the boxes marked Brooks. Inside were old photographs, thank you letters, school report cards, and newspaper clippings. Naomi picked up a document and covered her mouth in surprise. Ethan looked over her shoulder. It was a college scholarship agreement signed by his father. The scholarship had paid for Naomi's mother's education years before she was born. My grandmother never told us this, Naomi whispered. Ethan looked through another folder. There were dozens of families just like yours. My father helped people quietly. He never wanted attention. Naomi smiled through her tears. That sounds like him. The radio crackled one more time. Do not leave that room empty-handed. Ethan looked around until he noticed a small metal box sitting alone on the highest shelf. He opened it carefully. Inside was a flash drive and another letter. The letter was short. If greed ever reaches this house, the truth is on the drive. Give it to the board. Give it to the employees. Give it to the families who earned it. Ethan slipped the drive into his pocket. Suddenly, the old lights above them flickered. A deep sound echoed through the hidden hallway. The bookshelf had finished opening. Footsteps moved through the passage. Then Michael's voice carried through the darkness. Ethan, I know you found Father's room, and I know you are not alone. Tell Naomi Brooks that her grandmother kept the biggest secret of all. Michael's words settled over the hidden room, and for a long moment neither Ethan nor Naomi moved. The old lights hummed softly above them while the footsteps outside came to a stop. Ethan looked at Naomi. Your grandmother kept a secret. Naomi held the small box from the shelf and slowly nodded. She kept many secrets. She believed some promises were bigger than one lifetime. Michael's voice came again, quieter now. Father wanted Sarah Brooks to protect something because he knew our family would fight over it one day. Ethan took a careful step toward the doorway. Then tell me the truth, Michael. Why are you here? There was a long silence before his younger brother answered. Because I found Father's last letter. I learned that he planned to give away a large part of the company to the employees and the families who built it with him. Ethan looked down at the flash drive in his pocket. Michael continued. Daniel and I thought we could hide the documents and keep the company under family control. Then we discovered Sarah Brooks had protected the final proof. Naomi looked at Ethan with surprise. My grandmother never wanted money. Ethan smiled gently. Maybe that is exactly why my father trusted her. Another silence filled the passage. Then Daniel spoke for the first time that night. Mr. Walker, nobody has to lose. Open the door. Let us talk. Ethan looked around the hidden room. The shelves were filled with stories of ordinary people whose lives had been changed by kindness. Scholarships, medical bills, retirement funds, family photographs. His father had built an empire, but this room proved that his greatest work had never appeared in a business magazine. Naomi carefully unfolded the last letter from the metal box. There was one final page hidden inside. She read it quietly before handing it to Ethan. If my sons ever stand on opposite sides of this promise, listen to Sarah's family. They will remind you that character is worth more than control. Ethan closed his eyes. Then he made a decision. He walked to the doorway and spoke into the darkness. Michael, I am opening the door, but I am not opening it for the company. I am opening it because you are my brother. The hidden door slowly moved aside. Michael stood there beside Daniel. Neither man stepped forward. Ethan held out the old photograph of his father and Sarah Brooks. Father trusted people who served others, Ethan said. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that lesson. Michael looked at the photograph and lowered his head. Daniel quietly placed the briefcase on the floor. Ethan reached into his pocket and removed the flash drive. Tomorrow morning this goes to the board, to our employees, and to every family Father wanted to honor. Nobody argued. The house seemed quieter than it had all night. Naomi looked toward the shelves one last time. My grandmother used to tell me that the richest people are the ones who leave doors open for others. Ethan smiled. Then she was wiser than any chief executive I have ever met. Dawn slowly crept through the windows as the security lights outside flickered back to life. Hours later, the board members, lawyers, and employees gathered at the estate. Ethan placed the old notebook and the flash drive on the table. He told them everything. The scholarships stayed. The family promises stayed. New opportunities were created for the workers and their children. When the meeting ended, reporters crowded around Ethan Walker expecting a speech about business and success. Instead, he looked across the lawn where Naomi was quietly preparing to leave and said, "The person who saved this company never sat in a boardroom. She simply chose to do the right thing when it would have been easier to walk away." Naomi smiled and started toward her old car. Ethan called after her, "You still forgot your envelope." Naomi laughed softly. "Keep it. Consider it a reminder." Ethan opened the envelope one last time and found a single line written in Sarah Brooks's careful handwriting. Money can build a house, but only kindness can bring people home.